Hello everyone, and welcome to Chapter 4, the video lecture part 1 on the emergence of social work as a profession. Social work just didn't all of a sudden appear one day. It went through an evolution to become a profession, as professions do. They start out, at least in the case of social work, really started out as a volunteer movement. Then over time, it became an occupation, a job. You could actually be paid to be a social worker. And from an occupation, it moved towards being a profession. And that's really what this chapter is about. So as always, I encourage you to read every page, every paragraph, pay attention to the back of the chapter, the key concepts and ideas, all the things that are listed in italics. Those are all things that are important and may end up being on the quiz for this particular chapter. Now, at the beginning, three things are mentioned that distinguish an occupation or a job from a profession. And that's professional autonomy, professional authority, and professional responsibility. I'm just going to mention a little bit about each of these. Professional autonomy is that the person, because of the training, the education, the specialized knowledge that they've gained, they need the freedom to be able to treat their patients or their clients how they deem to be best to do. If you think about it in terms of like the medical profession, you come to a doctor, you share a certain set of symptoms, they have the freedom to decide what tests that they should do, if any, to get further information. And then once they have that information, from their knowledge and from their experience, they're free to choose and propose to you what kind of treatment to go ahead and to initiate. And that's why sometimes people will actually go and get a second opinion. The doctor will hear from you the same symptoms, may order the same or different test, and then may choose to present to you a similar or even different form of treatment. That's that professional autonomy. Now, in just a regular job, things are very much more structured, and this is how you do it, and this is the one way you do it, and this is the only way you do it. You don't need to really consider or think much about it. This is how it's done. We'll train you, and this is how we want you to do it every day. That's not bad or good. It's just different. There's a difference between an occupation and professional status. Now, professional authority. Society has granted professionals, because of their education, because of their training and their specialized skills, has given them authority over certain aspects of life. Like, for instance, the medical field, or let's take a different one, the dental field. When you have a problem and you have a cavity that needs to be filled, who has the authority to do that? Who has society sanctioned and approved to do that? It's not a social worker. It's not a lawyer. It's not a grocer. You go to the dentist. Because this is just the way it is, we don't even really think about it. But that is one aspect that makes it a profession. They have the authority from society to perform those services within that area. And other people don't. If they try to, they're going to get in trouble. You try to practice medicine without a license, you're going to be in trouble. And now the third thing is professional responsibility. Because society has given professionals the autonomy and the authority, and in essence, a monopoly, they bear a greater responsibility, the professionals, to police themselves, to have codes of ethics, to have a mechanism by which, if one of their patients or clients feels that they have been treated improperly, that the professional is incompetent for some reason, that there has to be a way that individuals can then file a complaint with a professional organization like the American Medical Association, or if there's a complaint against a social worker, A complaint can be filed with the local chapter of the NASW, the National Association of Social Workers. An investigation will be done. So while professionals have a greater degree of autonomy and have been granted a greater degree of authority within society, they bear a greater responsibility for integrity, for competence, and to police their own ranks. So that's very important. When you're looking at this chapter, I want to suggest that you view it in terms of eras, because that's how it's broken down. It wasn't a quick or a smooth move from being a volunteer movement to being a profession. And so they've broken it down into eras. And the first era is before 1915. And that's when social work moved from being volunteers to actually being an occupation or a job. So in your preparation for the quiz, be sure that you have each of these eras distinct in your mind and in your memory and what occurred during those times. I want to highlight a few of them for you. So in the beginning, social work was a volunteer movement. There were a number of different people involved. A lot of wealthy people were involved, in particular the women of wealthy families. It was considered to be a social obligation that if you were blessed and had abundant means, that you should help the poor and the needy. These were not trained individuals, but these were people who felt that obligation and cared and then did the work on a voluntary basis. Others later got involved as well. And so that went on for a long time. And it wasn't until around the 1860s, when we were having the Civil War, that social work began to move towards being more of a job, a profession, or not a profession, but a job, something you could get paid for. And it was actually in the U.S. Department of War where social workers were first hired. In the U.S. Sanitary Commission, the Department of War realized that the great suffering that was going on by the soldiers in the Civil War, both the wounds that they were experiencing, the trauma that they were experiencing, and the impact that was having not only on them, but on their families as well. So they actually hired people to do this kind of social service. And that went on for a number of years, even for a few years after the war was over. And then it kind of began to fade out. But out of that sanitary commission, there were some incredible early social workers who were pioneers. Be sure in the chapter you read about these, primarily women who served as nurses. In fact, the chief nurse, the head nurse in the U.S. Sanitary Commission was Dorothea Dix, a real social welfare pioneer. But there was also Clara Barton. She went on to do something you might have heard about called the Red Cross, and other women as well, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, just some amazing women who served during that time, who went on with others to do incredible work in pioneering social welfare and social work. And as I've mentioned before, any time that you have people mentioned, even if they're mentioned briefly, these are the pioneers, the founders, the heroes of this profession. So you're probably not familiar with them. And, this is something you're going to want to make sure you know each of these folks. Now, in this chapter, there is a table, 4.1, and it's about selected events in social welfare and social work history. Now, on the quiz, you're not going to be asked a specific question like, remember table 4.1 in 1850, a specific event like that. But I do want to encourage you to use that timetable to get an overall sense of how things flowed throughout history, starting at the founding of the United States. It'll give you kind of a timeline and a sense of how things came about. So I think it can be very useful to help put you in the frame of mind, especially for the quiz. And it goes over several pages, so I'd take some time, I would suggest, lingering over it. All right, this is the end of part one. I encourage you to go ahead and come on over, and we'll continue in part two.